Hello, this is Ty Jockson and welcome to another episode of Stories in the Säfärsphere. I'll admit today is a bit of a lazy episode. I put this together basically in one day. A lot of it is just text. This is going to be a video breaking down the six main factions. Count that right, aren't I? Yeah, six main factions that are all at play at some point or another. Obviously I've mentioned a lot about the factions before, and I have mentioned just about everything to do with them already, but I thought it would be good for posterity to have a video where everything about them is in one place. And it also gives me a chance to talk about some stuff that happens later on and it doesn't quite get fleshed out very quickly. Some of this stuff only really fleshes itself out in the end of part 3, when everything is saved and whatever. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's just start. So over here we've got the New Age Kingdom over on the far left here, and we've also got some sort of quote or motto for all of the factions here at the top. So the motto of the New Age Kingdom is New Day, New Dawn, New Age. And then we've got a lot of the text here is just how I have stuff written down. As I said, I made this episode very quickly, so a lot of this stuff is just what I've got written down in my own notes, which is why it doesn't look very viewer friendly. But if you want to read this, you can. I'm just going to kind of talk about what I feel like talking about, and that's there if you want to read it yourself. But the New Age Kingdom, as you can see from this little stat chart, it doesn't have a very high population, and the population itself isn't very strong either. For the record, the strength is not in relation to like the actual strength of the faction. The strength is in relation to the strength of the fighters in the faction, of the individual person. So as you can see, not a great population, not a great strength, but their technology for the New Age Kingdom is, off the charts. That's their big strength. Something that maybe would have been good to include as well is reliability as one of their stats. For all the characters have a reliability stat, because all the weapons and technology of the different factions have a different level of reliability. For instance, the New Age Kingdom, all of its technology is very powerful. It's going to do a very good job. However, it's not very reliable. It could be prone to getting, hit in the right place and detonating. It might not have the proper safety precautions in place. It might just not work. It could fail after a shot or two. And it might not be good in sustained fire. Everything the New Age Kingdom makes, well, not everything, but just about everything the New Age Kingdom makes is tested live fire. So if something does not work, you're probably dead because you are there unarmed. Not great, is it? They make up for their population by having the largest population of synthetic organisms. Well, I guess not organisms, is it? Synthetic units, I suppose, both in combat. They've got a lot of autonomous vehicles in the New Age Kingdom. So both in combat, they've got a lot of autonomy going on where they're not losing any actual lives. And also, just in day-to-day life, they've got a lot of robots that help with construction, running stores, building stuff. That's the kind of construction, but I mean like more building weapons and stuff. Basically everything. The majority of the population is synthetic, and that's because their technology is so good that the synths can make up for the organics just fine. There is no discrepancy between the two, and a lot of the time the synths actually are superior. But of course, very, very few of the synths do actually have free will. That is, of course, the very important rule of all sci-fi: you don't give the robots free will. Absolutely nothing gets free will. That said, of course, there are a couple that get free will, including the leader, which is Monarch. So the leader of the New Age Kingdom isn't a person per se. It's a giant supercomputer that is sort of hooked in to all the technology around the kingdom, who gets fed information on the basis. And although They are, let's say, looked after by an organic council. They're I don't know quite the word, but they're basically in charge. But there is an organic council of living people who just make sure that none of the suggestions from the monarch is kill everything. That's not happened yet, but you can never be too sure. Monarch takes their job very seriously, as seriously as a robot can. One funny thing to note is that Monarch actually very frequently suggests, hey, maybe the best choice is to make peace. And that choice always gets overruled because everyone's always at war. Should say a bit about how long this war's been going on and how useless it is at this point. Hang on a second, I'm just pulling up something quickly on my phone. Right. So we're going to quickly also go over the ship preferences. So all of the different factions have access to every type of ship, of course. However, all the different factions will have a preference for types of ships that they want to be using. As you can see over here, there's only really, 5 or 6 different types of ships that the GUP ever really want to use. Actually, I think it's about the same here, they're just bigger words, aren't they? Anyway, I do have very brief descriptions of the different types of ships. As you can see, there is a big overlap here. All factions have patrol craft and corvettes because obviously you kind of all need corvettes and patrol craft. You know what, I'm not going to waste time going over the descriptions, or over the crappy descriptions I've got for these different types of ships. I think you can mostly imagine. I will put a link in the description of what helped me with making ships. There's a video, and as I say, I'll put in the description. Video in the description. I think it's like half an hour long, maybe an hour long. I don't remember how long it is, but it's a really, really good video on making spaceships, the different types of spaceships, naming ships, all that. And you can find, if you care, you can find what these different types of ships sort of mean. I will make one note. Dreadnoughts are not a real type of ship. All of these names obviously come from ships that exist in real life. Dreadnoughts aren't a real type of ship. However, in that video I was just mentioning, dreadnoughts are mentioned. They're sort of like battle cruisers or battleships, but there's some sort of revolutionary design in them. I think dreadnoughts were introduced in World War II, but it might have been World War I. And dreadnoughts were a very brief classification for this really strong type of ship that had no counter and was just the best ship at the time. And that's why it got the classification of dreadnought. But then, of course, I think it ended up really being like a battle cruiser or something. So only the New Age Kingdom gets dreadnoughts because obviously the New Age Kingdom is constantly pioneering technology. Therefore, a lot of the time their big ships can be classified as dreadnoughts because they're doing something new that the other factions don't really quite understand yet. Finally, for the New Age Kingdom, we get onto their Titan class ship. Of course, as much as I do try to keep a relative amount of the science fiction grounded to a degree, to a fun degree, it would be just rude of me not to make the giant ridiculous ships. So every faction has their own giant ridiculous ship. For the New Age Kingdom, they have a planet cracker type ship, which, as you can guess, is, a giant ship that is capable of destroying entire planets. It's not used very often. Obviously, destroying an entire planet very, very, very rarely is going to ever be worth anything ever. But sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes even just saying that you have that kind of power is enough to prove the point. Basically, it's their Titan is half just a giant research facility to have some constant practicality from it, and the other half of this giant, massive, miles and miles long ship is just a giant railgun, I guess, or maybe a giant coil gun, something around that line, that is just going to launch an absolutely huge projectile at absolutely ridiculous speeds across unbelievable, distances of space. Whereas planet crackers, usually in sci-fi, they'll come up to the planet and then shoot like a big laser down or bombard it or something like that. And this can be, several solar systems away, and it's more of a planet sniper, I suppose, isn't it? So this thing is absolutely deadly, but also very, very rarely used, which is why it has that secondary purpose of just being a big science facility. In case you didn't realise from how long I took on the New Age Kingdom, the faction. The New Age Kingdom was the best faction. Anyway, moving on to the United Species Alliance. Together we stand, so never we fall. That very much leads on to their beliefs that every single species is equal. Because they believe every species is equal, their population is their strength. They have an absolutely huge population. However, because they take on absolutely everyone, they have a very small, recruitment process. Basically, can you move? If yes, you can fight. So the strength of their individual fighter is the lowest of all the factions, because they just let anyone into the army, basically. Anyone that wants to fight for the country, wants to fight for the faction, can fight for the faction. Go for it. Have fun. They're also in the middle of the road for technology. They by no means have their high-level technology, the cutting edge of the New Age Kingdom, but at the same time they're not like, the oldest and scraping the bottom of the barrel technology that the Galactic Union of Power uses. They're very much nicely in the middle. It's about where you would expect from classic sort of sci-fi settings. That's about it. And again, because obviously we've got this dynamic of better technology means less reliability, their technology is very in the middle. Sometimes it's going to fail. Usually you should be alright. But should do the job quite fine. Again, their weakness only really comes from the fact that individually their fighters aren't the best. Their leader is, Losruti Hathoron? Losruti Hathoron? It's the one character I've named and can never get right. They're an avian character, so, as I say, all species are equal, therefore any species can have the position of leader. Because of the democratic nature, whereas for the New Age Kingdom, the monarch is always the leader, because why would you have anything other than an all-knowing supercomputer as the leader? Losruti Hawthorne is technically a leader, but he doesn't get to say everything, he doesn't get to do everything, he's just the face, if you will. He sort of comes from a line, as you can probably guess from that second name of Hathoron. It's quite the prestigious sounding name, I like to think. It's a very generically sci-fi prestigious sounding name. So he comes from a long line of, quite wealthy, quite well-known, quite well-respected people. But he's a lot more laid back, and he's a lot more, happy-go-lucky. He's a lot more cheery. So he doesn't exactly fit into his position very well. Of course, he accepts the position. He doesn't have much of a choice. But sort of going on as the stories do, he's kind of the leader they need at the time when things, when people have to start coming together instead of always fighting. Again, of course, we have their ship preferences here. With such a large, population, they're very fond of their carriers and what's not, because they can just send out, swarms and swarms of their people who are willing to fight and die for their faction. Their Titan-class ship is less a warship, per se. It's kind of like a giant flying biodome. It's a world ship, as I've named it. You can think sort of maybe like the Halo rings from Halo, where just without the destructive power and without it being a ring shape. It's kind of just a paradise world for them all to live on. To get to the world ship, it's a very rare opportunity. It's a very rare opportunity that few get to experience. But, it's basically like the perfect holiday getaway, if you will. It's there for everyone to go to and boost their morale, which is, of course, the most important thing when you have such a large population. Moving on to the Galactic Union of Power, or the GUP, and their quote is, "Power through purpose." Nice, quick, simple. So the GUP believes that certain species are superior to other species. They're sort of like the exact opposite of the United Species Alliance, in a way. But they also don't believe the things that the New Age Kingdom believe, where the New Age Kingdom believe that synthetic life is to be superior at some point. They don't believe that. They believe that some species already existing, already organic, are the peak of where you're going to go, and it doesn't get any better than that. A handful of them are humans, of course, horses, jackals, those typical strong, intelligent, and prestigious species. You're not going to see like a capybara running for president. So that's their whole deal. Those species are high up, and then any species that aren't deemed to be the superior species typically don't get treated oh so well. And that means that there's usually a lot of infighting. There's a lot of civil wars with the Galactic Union of Power. So this means that they have the lowest population. Well, they have a population somewhere around equal to the New Age Kingdom, but slightly lower. It just wouldn't be fair to give them 1 star. But it's slightly lower than the New Age Kingdom, but they don't have any of the synthetics to make up for their losses, really. They have a few, but not many. Which of course means that, which of course leads on to the fact that their technology is just the worst technology, which of course comes with the benefit of that back and forth that I kept mentioning. If you remember from the weapons dealer episode, in fact, the arms dealers episode, they even have an entire branch of arms dealer that just keeps their technology in top shape. So their technology never fails. It doesn't happen. That technology is old, but it is tried and it is tested, and it's not going to fail. It might not be perfect, but it'll always work. You can rely on it. Just the same as you can rely on the individual soldier. Whether it's from having, the superior species, get all the best training and all. Why have they got 6 stars? That's supposed to be 5 stars. It's not supposed to be 6. That's a bit ridiculous. From their superiors getting all of the absolute best training and what's not, to the lowest of the low having to fight for their own survival. The individual fighter of the Galactic Union of Power is just the strongest of them all. Again, if you think back to the weapons dealer episode, you have alpha augmentations, who obviously directly upgrade even the fighting prowess of those already great soldiers, with augmentations and prosthetics and so on and so forth. So, in a head-to-head battle, one-on-one, between all the factions, the Galactic Union of Power is going to win. Of course, it's their numbers that suffer. Their leader is Nalfia Nito. Nalfia, when they were quite young on, they're also a human. They're one of the few human characters. Sorry, I've zoned out for a second there. They're one of the few human characters, and they're very much that generic sort of. She's that very generic sort of brash, hard woman. You know what I'm trying to say. I don't know what the words are though. She's a Russian stereotype. That's what I'm trying to say. She's a Russian stereotype. The GUP was, yeah, right. She's a Russian stereotype. Nalfia Nito, at a very young age, was left unable to have children, because she was stabbed through the womb. So that led to her wanting to become a leader. So she sort of had children in a sense in the people that she governed over, and could protect them like that. And so while she has this hard front, she also has this motherly side where she wants to protect everyone under her, and of course lead her faction to be the greatest. Because whereas the other two factions believe that they should win, they understand that maybe they won't. Whereas the Galactic Union of Power only believes, yeah, we are the best, we are going to win, like it's clear. Which is why in their ship preferences, it's basically all of the big scary ships, all of the giant slow-moving ones that have very strong weapons and very strong armour. Which of course leads to their Titan ship, which is basically just a floating gun wall. I haven't exactly figured out what I want to do with this ship, but I do know that it's very, very slow. It's not going to go very far, but if you fight it, you're not going to win. You could put like several things up against it just solo, and it's going to win every time flawlessly because it's just got ridiculous armor, ridiculous weapons. It's a powerhouse. That's the point of it. It's a flying fortress. And that's the three main factions. These are the main three factions that you're going to see time and time again, mentioned over and over. These are the important ones. The next three factions are sort of DLC factions. These are factions that get introduced later on in the story's main line, or factions that don't actually even exist until that. In fact, we can quite clearly line between here. So the conglomerate exists, but doesn't really get introduced until later on, whereas Wire and New Raleigh do not exist at all, and only come into being towards the ends of the stories. So, the conglomerate had a very... also, I should mention that these three had very, very long background descriptions, so I couldn't copy in like a nice, neat little description like these. It's just a small chunk out of the bigger descriptions. The conglomerate is kind of like my own rendition of an SCP corporation type deal, if you're familiar with that. They're technically the strongest faction, at least for a while, until Wire comes along. They're technically the strongest faction, but they don't do anything. They don't take up any space. As you can see from their little quote, during the Age of the Broken Cycle, which is the age that this takes place in where everyone's fighting, few things are sacred, few things but the conglomerate. No one fights the conglomerate, mostly because the New Age Kingdom tried for a bit and realised that they couldn't, and the other two factions were just like, yeah, we're not even going to bother. The conglomerate, no one really knows whether they use technology or whether the conglomerate is doing something else that is unfathomable. And I'll give you a tip, it's the unfathomable option. They don't use technology. Anything they want to destroy, they could, and quite frankly, they probably might stand a chance of taking over the galaxy if they wanted to. Although, with all the factions united together, they might actually be able to win. Who knows? It is a very either way fight. No one really knows how big their population is. No one really knows what the strength of an individual is. All really knows that their technology, quote unquote, is very good. The conglomerate, unlike the main three factions on the left, don't have any planets to themselves. They don't have a presence. They don't have any borders per se. They sort of just live somewhere close to in the middle of all the factions. They all live on either a giant ship, their own Titan class ship, which is a... don't know why I named it a Brobdingnagian class ship. There's some sort of inside joke there that I've forgotten, and now it's just a Brobdingnagian ship. But that's where they live. Absolutely giant ship that also doubles as their main research facility, the main place they live, so on and so forth. All they really do is research stuff, and I really hope that massive annoying sound doesn't come through. Okay, well, it's definitely come through. What is that? Alright, so someone just took a jet off outside my house. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes. They don't live on any planets, they all live in their ships. It's either in this big giant ship in the middle, which the ship itself, the Brobdingnagian class ship, is called the Conglomerate. That's the name of the actual ship, which is why the faction ended up getting named the same thing. So, yes, right, that's that. And anyone that doesn't live in the big main ship lives in the fleet of ships that always surround it and sort of just hover or idly move along. And those also are really, really big ships, alongside obviously a bunch of also smaller ships, but mostly a bunch of really big ships around this. Also absolutely gargantuan, the biggest Titan-class ship of them all. And that's their homes. They always just live in space. They're never grounded, ever. No one really knows where the conglomerate came from. There's, some people that believe that conglomerate are remnants of an older faction that sort of rose itself back to power and was doing something in the background that allowed them to become this powerful. Some people believe that, the best and strongest minds of the three other factions all came together to form the conglomerate. Some people believe that the conglomerate came from a different dimension entirely and they just showed up one day and whatever. People put up with it. Whatever the truth is, no one knows. No one knows what the conglomerate is doing. No one knows why the conglomerate is here. No one knows what the conglomerate is, really. Other than, they don't have any unique species to them. They are still just the species of every other character, but they're just kind of there, and no one really knows when their faction started up or where it came from, but they do know that trades can be made, and they do know not to mess with them unless they want a serious war on their hands. Next we move on to Wire, and this is a quote from Wire's leader, Cable. This is when he's, kind of losing it. He's like, this was my work, my project, my magnum opus, and it was never a group effort. But now I'm done, you could be part of it. You all can. So, although he obviously worked with other scientists when making Wire, Cable is the creator of Wire. Of course, he never used to be called Cable. That's sort of a pseudonym he took on to fit in better with Wire. But he was one of the main scientists behind Wire, and eventually he sort of decided, Wire's got some serious potential. I want this to all be for myself. It's my project now. This isn't anyone else that's working on it. This is mine. It's not a group effort. I'm doing all the work. Classic mad scientist sort of deal where he sort of goes off and off and off and off, and eventually loses control of Wire. I believe last episode was the Linkwood episode, which is obviously one of the events that leads to Wire taking off as big of a deal it is. Cable is another one of the reasons, because Cable does not treat Wire with the respect that Wire ought to be treated with. Wire is a attempt from the New Age Kingdom to get a crushing advantage that should surely win them the war. The classic cycle of constantly thinking they're going to win. So they created the Wire, which stands for Worming Intelligent Reaugmentation Enhancement. The idea of this is that anyone can accept it, and it will, boost the strength of your bones or help you aim better. It can immediately repair ships by clogging any holes, or, it's Wire, so it's conductive, so it can fix any electrical faults. Basically, it could create super soldiers and super ships, unkillable ships. It could entirely change the course of combat for the New Age Kingdom, because none of their stuff would ever be able to really die. It's constantly just reanimated and repaired by Wire. Of course, that's not what happens. They lose control of Wire eventually, thanks to the three events, one of which being Cable, and Cable kind of becomes the mouthpiece for Wire. The Wire can be associated with, the flood from Halo. I'm trying to think of the ones. Maybe the aliens from the movie Alien. Xenomorphs. So on and so forth. Stuff like that. It's this all-consuming mass that as you can see at the end of their quote, on a grander scale, it makes up the sixth, because this is the last faction, I guess, technically. Actually, that's not really true. I don't know why I put 6, because the Wire comes before New Raleigh, but whatever. They make up the sixth and most imposing faction in the universe. Not the universe, sorry. The multiverse. Sorry, not even the multiverse. Of all existence? It's to be determined how big of a threat Wire is. This is sort of wrote from the point of view of, a deity. So they don't really know at what point Wire is going to stop. And of course, with the power of foresight, we know by the end of part 1, even, everything but Catus Caius is decimated by Wire. Wire takes over all of reality. Every layer of deity, every multiverse, every Säfärsphere and beyond. They are everything in the end. Which, of course, although they have none of their own creations per se, they have the ability to take over any population. They take any mass, so they have infinite population. They can't really be killed. It's really difficult to neutralize a Wire target, so they've kind of got the best power of them all. And their technology is, of course, any technology they can steal and any technology they can splice together into even more powerful technology. Therefore, they've even got the best technology, except maybe compared up against the conglomerate. But of course, once the conglomerate's consumed, then they're of course got the best. So that finally leads us on to New Raleigh. New Raleigh is not a faction that really takes off in the first act. They show up in the first act. New Raleigh begins to show up in the first act. However, New Raleigh does not get any traction. New Raleigh is sort of a faction that DLCs itself on and opens up more opportunities for playing around with the lore after the universe is saved from Wire during the third act. So New Raleigh is, as you might guess, the new rendition of Raleigh. Raleigh is the homeland of the Gulicanis. The Gulicanis is the one unique species that I've made up for this. Well, technically the one unique species if you don't count the deities. So when the SMG, I mentioned this in episode 2, there is an SMG or a supermassive gate that opens, and the leader of Raleigh, Mal Raleigh, I'm just putting Raleigh as a second name. He technically doesn't have a second name, but if he did, it would be Raleigh. Mal Raleigh comes through that portal and begins starting up Gulicanis culture, also in the third dimension. Even though the Gulicanis back in Raleigh are only in the medieval age, or somewhere around there, there are occasionally bits of technology that somehow get through there, through these strange constantly opening and closing portals that no one really goes through. And so when they get there, of course it is also after they've had a lethal civil war that I think kills, if I remember rightly, 63% of the Gulicanis population. So they have the lowest population of them all. They have a very, very small population. But because they've just come out of that civil war, and because they are these really strong, sort of canine-like, people, they also have really high individual power. Because they've had technology in their homeland as well, and they've been studying it like it's, a religion, almost, an add-on to their religion. They also know the insides and outs of technology very well. So they've got a really low population, but they're on the higher scale for technology and power. They're probably one of the more balanced, jack of all trade factions, I would say. Because their reliability, although they have very high technology, their reliability is actually a bit higher than the New Age Kingdom, despite the fact that their technology is close but not quite reaching it. Despite their technology rating, they have a higher reliability than they probably should for that rating, because again they've studied technology so closely and had so much time to do it. And of course, this little quote here is a poem from Kulikanist culture that is after the fact of their civil war and ends up getting spread during the creation of New Umrali. So this little poem will mean a lot more once I get to the Tale of Two Priests storyline. But this is basically talking about User, who is Mal's wife, I suppose. She was the second in command of Umrali before it became New Umrali. So she was the little old lady that lost her way. Her morals turned to brown and her face to burn. She planned to release a monster alone. This monster, it's talked about as Thuru Think, which Umrali was created to hold. And her morals turned to brown because she started this own faction of her own in Umrali, which is what began the civil war. And they all wore brown cloaks, so her morals turned to brown. Her face turned to bone because her head's a skull. It was always a skull. It didn't really turn to bone, but you know, it rhymes. I'm still working that part out a bit. She fought with manipulation, magic, and hate, but victory was taken by her war-bearing mate. So, as I said, Mal wins, and he used to be her mate. Mal is also the incarnation of war. So, you know, war-bearing. Whereas Usa is the incarnation of magic. So they use magic. They also used hate against Mal for the treatment of their daughter, the way he treated their daughter. And she also used manipulation because in her heart of hearts she knew she was tricking everyone in her faction to fight for her for something that wasn't true. And then finally, with her death comes failure to unshackle, but an ancient beast always gets its last cackle. She dies, of course. She doesn't win in her goal of trying to kill Mal and overthrow Umrali. However, she hasn't really failed to unshackle, because with her death, Thuru Think still gets the same bonus of one of those two demigods being dead, so Thuru Think is closer to his freedom. So the ancient beast, being Thuru Think, gets the last laugh, gets the last cackle. As I say, all this will make a lot more sense once I get to the Tale of Two Priests. However, it'll also make a lot more sense next episode, episode 9, because I'm finally getting around to covering Sal, the daughter of Umrali, who is possibly the most important character of all of them, and might end up actually being one of the most important videos, except for the first two videos, of course, because that's storyline in the actual universe. But other than those two videos, the next video might be the most important video. That's the reason this video isn't quite so good. I've been working on the next video a bit harder. And that's going to be Sal's video about her character and about all the stories that are close to her. And I'm very excited to tell that one, because I think Sal might be my best character. Certainly my favourite. So that's next episode, you know? I will see you next episode for Sal's episode. I'm just rambling the same thing over and over again. I'm going to stop now. This was the episode where I broke down the factions and finally got a place for them all to be in one episode. Next episode is going to be Sal, daughter of Umrali, character breakdown, and any of the stories being broken down that involve her as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I'll see you next episode.